Welcome to the Profile Corner. In the last video I partially restored a Bedrock 605 plane, and at the end of that video I mentioned that while the plane is working well, I prefer to use a router instead. That's kind of a strange comment because you don't normally use a router to take the place of a plane, specifically a hand plane. I got to thinking about it, and yeah, that is kind of an odd statement to make. However, I've got a couple items that I picked up at auctions years ago that may better explain what I was talking about. I wasn't necessarily referencing these, however they do fit in with the last video. Years ago, I bought a kit that came in a big box. This is a plane and router kit from PRK. I'm not sure exactly when they manufactured this kit. I did find on the internet a price list that was set to go into effect on January 1st of 1959 that listed the router and the hand plane that goes along with the router in its price list. It also listed off the price list for the fence that goes along with the router, a sharpener for the cutter that goes into the plane portion of the kit, and also the router base. So that's kind of interesting that this is from potentially the late 1950s when they released this particular unit. Now the plane is kind of interesting. I'll bring it up a little bit closer here so that you can see it. Essentially, it's just like a standard Stanley hand plane handle on the back, and then the router motor is inserted into the hole, and then it spins a spiral cutter, and of course this is used to edge joint a board, potentially a door or something like that. So here's the router motor for it. The 1959 catalog listed this as a 3/4 horsepower motor, and I found a later reference saying that it was a 7/8 horsepower. This is a model motor 1100. It's 5 amps, and then it just fits into the side, just like so. And then it gets screwed in, just as if it were going into a regular router base. It's quite tippy, but I think that that would work if you're desperate for something that would trim the edge of a board or the edge of a door if you're trying to install doors in your house. So it's an interesting design. There was also an optional edge guide that you could buy for the unit. This is rather primitive compared to some of the more common PRK edge guides that you would see nowadays, potentially out on eBay, or some of the Bosch edge guides. And then it also came with a cutter sharpener. This actually has the cutter mounted into it right now, and the router motor would sit right down on top here, and it would drive a grinding wheel, and then it would actually sharpen the profile of the spiral cutter bit. That's kind of an interesting little thing, and you would look at this and say, well, that might be a nice kit to have if it were $100. And it came with a router. Of course, PRK routers used to be kind of expensive when they were released for commercial uses. So this 1100 model router motor was listed at $47 back in 1959. That's pretty cheap, or at least it sounds like it's pretty cheap. Of course, that's not including the cost of inflation, what that's done to the dollar bill. And then there was a router base, which is right here, that was $12.95. There was a 7/8 horsepower router listed for $59.95. And the kit that I've got here, including the big box, That was listed for $143.50 US dollars. I plugged that into an inflation calculator. $143.50 in 1959 is $1,597.61 when it's adjusted for inflation. But if you think about it, and the cost that you see on various tools from Germany, those green tools that have a lot of plastic, this would be right in the price line of those tools. Unfortunately, this router motor is apparently lacking the brushes. It looks like somebody tried to repair it and they never installed the brushes. So I tried to plug this in and see if it would electrocute me, and it didn't actually do anything. Okay, so that's one of the kits that I've got here on the table. I'm going to put this away and I'll bring out the other kit. The last unit that I just showed was a model 100-PRK. It's a plain router kit is how it was listed. Now I've got here a slightly different version. This one is most likely 150-PRK. I'll see if I can find some more information on this kit. This is a hinge and door installation kit. It includes a Model 150P planer body. It's all metal. And you can see that it has a built-in trigger switch. And the router motor would just slide right into this area here. And then it would plug into the top. So that this would then be able to power the router that's spinning the spiral bit. Okay, this is similar to the previous design, except once again it's all metal. And then also in the kit is a D-handle router. I don't recall what the horsepower of this is. It's a Model 150M. It may be a 1 1/4 horsepower router. So it's kind of interesting to see how inventive they were back in the late 1950s and early 60s. That's back when they were trying to find all sorts of uses for radial arm saws. So here we can unplug it from the D-handle, and then we can take it and we can install it into the plain body, just as if it were a router base. Something like that. And of course this router motor is quite heavy, but that's how they designed it. And this motor actually does still work, which is kind of surprising, as old as it is. Unfortunately, somebody has cut off the grounded plug on it. And of course there's no grounded plug here going from the motor into the base. So I guess it doesn't really matter too much that somebody snipped off the grounded plug that goes into the electrical outlet. Let's see if I can get this plugged in and we can check it out. So here's the router motor plugged in. And there it is running. It doesn't sound great. But of course, this tool is quite old. And so you wouldn't expect it to sound like a new router. So it's interesting that it still works. Let's set that aside for a moment and see what else is in the box. Here we've got the router base that has a bushing installed into it. Here's a grinder attachment, just like what was in the other kit, although this does not have the bit mounted into it. And then these are the templates for laying out for the hinges on a door that you would install if you buy a door that's not pre-hung. So it's all kind of interesting. to see what they came up with years ago. There's 3 of those in the box, by the way. I don't have the price list for this particular model. I'll look that up and then I'll put it into the video description along with links to where I found those price lists at, and also the other information about the routers. Well, I guess you can never have too many routers, and especially when you get interesting ones like this one. Okay, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.